Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Rippling Pages podcast. Now, are you a city dweller or a country lover? Are you enamored with or desire the bustle of the city? Perhaps a quiet country is a source of anguish in our ever-modernizing world, or maybe some green space is what you need. Either way, whatever your disposition, the pastoral genre, the idealization of country rural life with scenes of shepherding and landscapes, continues to appeal for writers and non-writers alike. Duncan, my guest today, is a poet from Denmark. He's published 2 collections, but it's his account and interpretation of Tityrus, the famous shepherd from Virgil's pastoral poems, regarded by some as the Roman Empire's greatest poet, has been translated into English by Maximilian Ribeiro and Sam Riviere. Duncan has been described by poet Luke Kennard as a voice so compulsively readable, both tersely clear and compellingly mysterious, that it gets into your head and starts narrating your own life. Duncan joins me from Funen in Denmark to talk more. Hi, Duncan. Thanks very much for joining me.
Hi, thank you. I'm glad to be here, Liam.
Glad to have you as well. Thanks very much, Duncan. Let's just get straight into it, and let's start with, what is it about Tityrus' story that appealed to you?
Well, I first encountered him, actually. I was on a trip to Scotland with my dad. He's from Scotland, so he was kind of a tour guide. And in a bookstore in Aberdeen, I picked up the pastoral poems of Virgil, and there I encountered Tityrus for the first time as a character in the poem, or actually it's more like a dialogue called "The Dispossessed." It was about an older shepherd and a younger shepherd. The older one's called Mølebus, and the younger one is called Tityrus. Civil war is roaming in the Roman Empire, and Mølebus has lost his estate, and Tityrus has traveled from the countryside to Rome to speak his cause and is allowed to keep his estate. And then they share a meal and talk about the situation. But it kind of stayed with me, the name Tityrus, for a while. I didn't use it for anything, and at that point I wasn't even sure if I was going to become a poet or a writer. But 2 or 3 years later, I was doing my education as a writer at the writing school in Copenhagen at the Art Academy, and I was actually working on another project, a novel which I never finished. But suddenly, when I was writing, this name came up, Tityrus, and kind of had to follow it. And then I realized that I kind of was starting to write what I would call modern pastoral poetry. I grew up in a small village. All my adult life, I've been kind of moving from the periphery to the center and back. For example, now I live on the countryside on Funen, but I work in Copenhagen as a teacher. So this movement from countryside to the big bustling city, where you go and earn some money, and then you go back and rest. His journey, in a way, and I think it interested me that was that old, 2,000 years old, had like the same movement from periphery to urban center and back, and it felt very relatable in a way.
So it was a book that you picked up about 10, 11 years ago. It stayed with you, for that period of time. And obviously, we've got the translation in 2023, and it was originally published in Denmark in 2019. So it's been on a bit of a journey, has this book, hasn't it? And I quite like this idea of the enduring theme of the kind of periphery and the centre, and the dynamic between the city and the countryside. And you are explicit in saying that this is a pastoral, in the same way that Virgil's work is a pastoral. And you do modernize it, you do update your version. There are power stations, pints of beer, porn sites. Why these details? Was there a wider commentary that you're trying to make on Virgil's poem?
For me, the difference between writing pastoral poetry 2,000 years ago and now is that the way I experience the countryside is also is always with an iPhone in my pocket. Like for me, it's natural for there to be a transformer station or being on the internet while I'm in the woods. And I really wanted the poetry to reflect that in a way that when you walk out into the woods and maybe you've been drinking, or you take your prescription drugs or whatever that you have to do, or somebody sends you a text, or you check something on the internet, or you think about porn sites. And I think that's for me, that's kind of where I want pastoral poetry to be, in a way, not idealized, not more kind of to be real, and also like agricultural woods in Denmark, and like there isn't really any pastoral land left in Denmark. It's basically fields and some small woods here and there. For me, it was important to show, in a way, nature as I see it now, experience it, and it's a nature that is not secluded from what's going on the internet.
What are the major differences then between that in terms of thematically, rather than obviously the fact that, this is 2,000 years later, and there are some obvious differences, but where's the diversion for you from Virgil's work?
I think I'm describing another kind of pastoral scenery, and another kind of it's both like the geographical scenery and that time has passed and there's been an agricultural revolution and stuff like that, but also that the countryside is not necessarily a possibility for rest and rejuvenation, or what you call it. It's the problems don't go away if you go and walk the fields, not for Tityrus. And I think, a two-sided idea, in a way, that there is not much idyllic Arcadian nature left in a country like Denmark because of intense farming. The difference between Virgil's pastoral poetry and mine is that the countryside represents something very peaceful for in Virgil's poems, and for me, for Tityrus, it's a place where everything still goes on, and being disturbed is part of it, and being anxious and being it doesn't have the same release or relievement as in Virgil's poetry. And
he's an agitated man, isn't he? He's a distracted man. I mean, the medication that he's on is Ritalin, which I think
ADHD and ADD as well. Yeah,
pastoral idea and the idea of roaming through the countryside. You're obviously there to look and see things and pick things out, but the other side to that is the fact that he's also being drawn to things that he doesn't necessarily want to be drawn for. And this continual sense of dissatisfaction in where he is.
There's a lot about desire, in a way, also like a desire to find peace or relieve pain, but also like basic youthful sexual desire and desire to get drunk and to both have a good time, but also not be anxious or find peace. And I think in many ways I attribute that also to being a book about young people. And that's also another thing I liked about pastoral poetry. In a way, it reminds me a bit of Beverly Hills 90210. Other things I grew up with like that. I think that was my first intense study of kind of youth culture and romance as a kid, coming home from school, and at some point I read this other pastoral poem called Daphne and Chloe, which is basically two young people who really wants to get together, but then one is abducted by pirates, and things happen like all the time. So there's always this tension about wanting to have a romance or sexual relationship and things getting in between. And it reminded me so much of television and stuff I grew up with. So in a way, I also went to pastoral poetry because I thought of it as a genre that worked with young people and worked with desire and worked a lot with just being kind of lustful.
Yeah, well, from Virgil to Friends to Beverly Hills 90210. I think, well, yeah, it's the are these characters then in those films and Tityrus, are these characters that are searching for something, or are they looking for distraction?
I guess there is a genuine search for something. Much of the time, it turns out to be distraction, and maybe that's how it is in a way when you're in your 20s, as Tityrus is, and there's this poem about and then Tityrus, he sees a porpoise, I think it's called, and he says, "Look, there's a porpoise," and everybody looks, and that's kind of it. So in a way, I think nature works. I think it works mainly as a scenery and a distraction. But in a way, I think it is both. But it's hard to say exactly what Tityrus gets out of it. Because in a way, it's written in third person. So in the poem, you see Tityrus seeing a porpoise, and that's it. I'm actually not sure what Tityrus finds in the pastoral landscapes. He finds a lot of animals when he gets confused and anxious, and sometimes he finds a bit of respite.
Because I think you were born in 1991. I was born in 1991, and I grew up in that culture of Friends and American TV shows, and people hanging around, wasn't it? They were just without a real sense of purpose. Do we ever have that as we go? Do we ever have days where we're not, especially as a writer, Duncan? Do you have days now where you're not searching for something, not looking for a deeper meaning in something, or have a day of without a sense of purpose, if you know what I mean?
I think when I wrote Tityrus, I had many days where I felt that, and I had I didn't have much money, but I had a lot of time. And now I'm a dad of two, and I have a day job as a teacher. And I wrote my second book, which was a lot about becoming a father. And in a way, that book is just kind of a turn away from Tityrus, which is Tityrus in a way, even though he's outside in countryside and in relations, he's kind of very unconnected. He's cruising in a way, and things disturb him, and he becomes anxious, and he takes his medication, and he gets drunk, and he gets high, and he gets satisfaction and dissatisfaction. But something about me right now, it's more, I don't have any days without a purpose, because in many ways my purpose is that the house doesn't burn down or something like that, that you have to
heaven forbid.
Heaven forbid. Get the kids to kindergarten, do your job, read your emails. And I really enjoy that in a way. I think the 20s with all their freedom is also, and for me was an extremely anxious time. I had no idea what I was doing and what I should be doing. So and sometimes maybe you long for a bit more time, and I think it will come when the kids are older. But now the question about purpose is more like the small purpose, like get everything moving, and the work of writing and the work of reading is more like I'll just pick up my work, and I'll read, and I'll write, and I'll answer emails, and I will read my student stuff, and I'll in between taking care of kids. So for me it's a much more connected way. And so in a way, I think Tityrus has followed me in a part of my life where it made sense, and now have I would almost call it a kind of a dark Biedermeier kind of life with an old house and a garden, and living in a small village, and then going off to Copenhagen to work. The perspective has changed a lot, but for me, the Tityrus book kind of encapsulate maybe being from generation 1991, and it has filled my 20s as well in a way. it's kind of a canonical work, Beverly Hills, for me, that it shaped.
The thing, I don't know if you ever watched, it was called That 70s Show.
Actually, I haven't. It didn't. I don't think it aired in Denmark.
Right, okay. So it was set in the 70s, but it was produced in, I don't know, like early 2000s maybe.
Yeah.
And the theme, as you saw, the theme tune's coming back into my head, and the words were hanging out down the street, the same old things we did
Yeah.
last week. And it was that culture of portraying people with not a greater sense of purpose. Hey there, just a quick message from me, and just to say, if you're really enjoying today's podcast, I'd be really grateful if you left a review on your favourite podcast provider. The Rippling Pages is all about letting writers talk about their craft so that you and other listeners can learn more about the art of literature. Leaving a review increases the reach of the podcast and hopefully means that more people will hear about the writer's work. Thanks very much, and it's just great to have you here. So I just thought there were some themes here about family, and there were more themes in here about family than there was in Virgil's. There's particularly some ideas around sons, about the ideas of sons and daughters and the different ways that they're treated in your book.
Yeah, well, there is this theme about the agricultural logic about butchering the male offspring before they become sexually mature or before they can reproduce, and in a way an overlap of agricultural logic in a way. And then on the other hand, there is, I think for my generation, there's actually quite a bit about the male vulnerability in the book, about a boy drowning, a boy's father committing suicide, and it's kind of in the periphery, and it's in these sentences that the male kids, the male what do you call small goats?
Kids, yeah,
are being slaughtered before they reach puberty in a way. So I think there is a theme about the male body being vulnerable as well, being vulnerable for getting in trouble or getting hurt. And you see also in the statistics that more men have ADHD and more men have trouble staying in school and keeping a job, in Denmark at least. And for me, that was also kind of part of my youth. The challenge of finding a way to cope with and live with ADD, attention deficit disorder. And I found a very good way now, which is to focus on becoming a writer and doing stuff that I'm good at, instead of I had to drop out of university a couple of times to realize that my it wasn't there. There's a lot of poetry about young men. It's kind of conventional in a way, and there's a lot of poetry about young men going out in the woods and seeking inspiration and stuff. And I'm not really interested about this. I'm not that interested in that, but I'm really interested about what is it like for young men on Ritalin to be in the woods. What is it for young men not being able to hold on to a job?
But I wanted to move to the forest and just speak about the forest, if that's okay. You've mentioned it, you referenced it. It's just quite an interesting place, both for you and for Virgil. Forest in Virgil's work, and there's a forest, and the forest in there is mythical as well. It is real. It feels like it is a real place. But it kind of has this mystical powers. And then in your version, it's home to a large transformer substation. So you've spoken about that you would see this you would see this walking through the woods. There are substations in the woods, there are power stations in the woods. Is there a bolder metaphor there?
Well, you could say there is the metaphor, or what Tityrus thinks, that the trees are very like a transformer substation. They are changing one substance into another. They're changing sunlight and, I guess, nutrients into growth. In a way, it's a very unmythical forest that Tityrus walks into. But on the other hand, he suddenly grabs a stick and thinks of himself as a wizard for a while. And then he lays down between some Iron Age mounts for a while. And has some kind of experience. So I think for me, or in the book, or in my poetry, and it's my newest poetry, I write quite a bit about the forest near my house here. But I think the forest is like a domain you can revisit as a poet, and every time you have to kind of rewrite or rethink. Like it could be in Tityrus is kind of a deadpan forest. Is kind of it's a mechanical forest. It's a disturbed forest in a way, but it also has a hint of the possibility of something mythical or something old or something. He's sitting writing his name on this kind of wand that he finds, and then he gets a text, somebody's here to pick him up, and he gets disturbed by a seagull and he runs away. So you get this, there's something to find there, but maybe he doesn't have the quiet to find it. And now when I visit the forest a bit older, it means something different. But forest is also agriculture in Denmark. It is also farmed. And I think with many of the domains that I visit in Tityrus, like the field and the forest and the city, it would be kind of tropes, a domain that every time you visit them, you have to kind of every time I visit something, I have to renegotiate it, to think about something has changed in me, and something has changed, for example, in the city. Now that I live here and I work in Copenhagen, I see Copenhagen completely different as to when I lived there. Now I see it mainly as a workplace. And before it was a place I lived and have had other relations to. And yeah, so in a way, I think there is a bigger metaphor with the forest, but it's kind of ever changing.
That hint towards something, there's always a hint towards a transformation. And, that's what the power station reminded me of, the large transformer substation. But that never really happens. The bigger transformation into something never occurs. There's always hints towards it, but it's never quite fully achieved. And again, you spoke a bit about Copenhagen and the city. What are your kind of ideas then of sort of, I guess, growth or transformation? Say Tityrus in 10 years' time. Would it be a different story, or would it be the same story?
Well, in the end, in a way, the whole collection is written in third person, but there is a prologue and an epilogue written in first person. And I think there is in a way there is kind of a small change in the end of the book, which is not that there's a big transformation for Tityrus, but more maybe a bit of an acceptance. I think he says something about that he lives in the train, or when he swims in the pool. I don't really have the English translation here, but living in the in-between in a way. The movement is the very last poem. I think that the genre of pastoral poetry fits the description of youth in a way, and the whole theme about anxiety and vulnerability. It in a way it settles a bit down at the end, moving for me, I would say, towards some kind of I guess also the idea of pastoral poetry is also the idea of being able to find something idealized in nature, or finding something bigger, or finding something more serene. And in the end, it's not in the woods or in the pastoral landscape, but it is in the trains, it's in the swimming pool of the university, it's in the empty lecture hall, or it's in the cafeteria where you buy your cigarettes, or where he finds his something that looks like kind of peace.
I just wondered if we could finish just talking a little bit about the translation of it. You've got Max Minden Ribeiro and Sam Riviere, scholars and poets in their own right, helping in the translation of this. And there is a distinct style to your work, especially in English. I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about that process.
Max did a fantastic job of translating from Danish into English, which is a lot of work. And I had a talk with Denise Hansen. I talked with her about me being like, should I try to translate it into English? And even though I'm pretty comfortable with English, I think for one thing is that I think my English is mainly influenced by American culture as well. So it wouldn't be,
all right, of course,
and it probably wouldn't be proper English in a way. But then Max, he did kind of the whole really hard work, and it was wild. It was wild for me to see it in English, because it felt so close to the Danish version from early on. Like he really caught kind of the flat, low style that it was written in, like much of the way. And then Sam came in later, and I've read quite a lot of Sam's book. Denise sent me a couple, and I ordered some of them. And I think in many ways we have a lot of the same interests, dealing with antiquity in a modern way. And also,
I did wonder if there might be some crossovers with some of Sam's work and the particular images taken from pop culture.
Yeah,
that was a very famous title of his collection.
Yeah, Kim Kardashian's marriage.
Yeah, Kim Kardashian's marriage.
Yeah, but I think we really clicked. So, after Max has like kind of did the rough but quite good translation from Danish to English, Sam looked it through, and we made some adjustment. Also, I think tone-wise, Sam and I are some way similar. That kind of the direct or flat tone in a way. You can almost hear it in Kim Kardashian's marriage, choosing that as a title. And I think the generations of poets that he's from really did kind of much of the legwork of getting making it okay to write in an internet language, or to write in a not like spoken kind of beat language, but more like really plain language. So I really enjoyed that of reading his poems. So he kind of helped a lot with finding the tone, like how should they sound, how can we find the flattest language as possible in a way, or the most modern. And I had the opportunity to meet with Max and Sam in Copenhagen and go through the translation. And I really enjoyed meeting them. So there is actually some places where the book differs a bit in the English translation, where the tone is a bit different, where we have had to move we have had to use some high language, some places where it wasn't. I think in a way that the reading of the book in Danish and the reading of the book in English isn't that dissimilar. I think it is quite the same experience. And then there is some things about, like, for example, I would say about a chair, but in the collection it says stool.
Right.
In the English translation, for me, stool sounds very medieval, but it is apparently in English language completely the thing you would say about what I call a chair. So
we use stools. We have stools everywhere,
and it's funny because it's very close to the Danish stol, which is chair.
So that's a very medieval term.
Yeah, it is probably. Yeah, and I thought about, like, also the inspiration of Tityrus being, and Carson and Beverly Hills and all the English. I read quite a lot of English poetry and enjoy it. That I don't think my sentences in Danish differs that much from English sentences, and there is a relation. So I think
Is that the language or the grammar?
I think it's partly the language, but also I think the syntax that I choose or work with it is quite close to Anne Carson's autobiography of Red, where she has a character called Gerion. So it's very much like Gerion walks to school, and it's very much in English. It's very much the Tityrus walks to school or takes the train. So it has kind of this very, very simple, almost child book like syntax some places, and that translated very easily into English, I would say. Yeah, I'm extremely happy with the work they did, and I think I could not have translated it at all by myself.
It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you about Tityrus, a pastoral. It's out now at the end of May. But for now, Duncan, thank you very much for joining me.
Well, thank you, Liam. Thank you for inviting me, and I really enjoyed the conversation and your lovely questions.
Big thanks once again to Duncan for joining me for today's episode. And of course, my biggest thanks to you for listening. Again, if you enjoyed today's episode, why not leave a 5-star rating on your favourite podcast provider? Otherwise, it's until next time.